So we're going to continue here. We spoke about the Shechina. We spoke about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which he says is the Or Hashem that's Godel Ma'od v'ef sheli es musik lelev bnei Adam. People cannot really grasp the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the Shechina is the one that's actually making that attempt. The Shechina is constantly going barotze v'shoif. She's trying to grasp the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and she can't. And then she realizes she can't, and then she tries again. And that's the nature of growth. That's how the Shechina constantly grows and becomes more and more conscious. So he says, "V'zei Torah HaKadosh Baruch Hu ruas kedusha b'chol mokem havdolo she nivdol mibnei Yodam," meaning the wisdom, the perception of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is beyond us. We're not able to access that light, and that's why it's called HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu means he's Kadosh, he's Nivdal, he's wiser than us, his Chachma is beyond us, and he's Baruch because he's the Mekara Bracha. Because what's the real Bracha? Is when the Shechina is masik his light. So he has the light, he has the Bracha, and when the Shechina comes in contact with him, she receives a Bracha. And when the Shechina turns away from him, then there's a period, then there's no Bracha. That's why it's called HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he's the one that's constantly trying to manifest within the Shechina more and more light. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted the creatures to be masig his light, so he was mitzamtzem, meaning he made his light smaller so that we can grasp it. So each one of us is getting a spark, a portion, a aura from that light, and that's our awareness. But it's not the original light. It's not really the light of the original awareness, of the collective awareness. It's only our portion of it. And our portion of it is mitzumtzam. It's according to our kelim, according to how much we can perceive. Accordingly, we get our chelik in the or. And that's what drives us. That's what allows us to live. This is the light of the Shechina that resides within the hearts of Klal Yisrael. Just like a mother makes her child grow, is the light that resides within them. So it says, through this light that comes into man, the light of perception, the light of the koach hadibur, through that interpretation of reality, he's tasting the light, he's tasting the intelligence that created the world, and through that, he grows to have a real life, and that's his difference. That's the difference between him, or between humanity, and the animals, because the animals don't have the ability to grow with the light. They don't have the koach hadibur. They can't develop their perception. Whatever they have, that's what they keep. So when we think about the Shechina and the growth of the light inside of us, last week we spoke about the angelic forces and the demonic forces that help us create our reality. And this is obviously the yesod of the Jewish tradition, the spiritual tradition. Malachim and Shadim is not something that came along in Judaism later on, but this is at the very beginning of Judaism, at the very base. In fact, the word Shadim is found in the Torah, in Parshas Azinu, where it says, Yizbechu leShadim lo Eloha. I think there's another mention in Parshas Achrei Mois, where it says, V'leyizbechi od ezifchem laseirim. And from there you see that Klal Yisrael, while they were in Mitzrayim, were doing this. They were shechting karbonis to Shadim. And this is something the Ramban discusses in detail over there in Parshas Achrei. And it's interesting to look at the other Mefarshim. If you have the Sefarna, the Kleyokar, they talk about their understanding of this process and how it works. And obviously there's a lot of information there. But the point that I'm trying to make is that what we're learning, what we've been learning for the last 3 shiurim, is not yet Torah. We didn't even get to the Torah yet. What we've been learning in these last 3 shiurim is simply Lashon HaKodesh. The terminology that was known to a child in Egypt, because he was growing up speaking Lashon HaKodesh. And why is Lashon HaKodesh so special? because Lashon HaKodesh puts the emphasis back on the spirit and removes the emphasis from the physical. A child grows up, he knows what a nefesh is, what a ruach is, what a neshama is, what a malach is, what a shade is. He knows the difference between these spiritual entities, and therefore he has the ability to control his spiritual destiny. People, as a nation, as a people, have the ability to control their emotional health, their intellectual health, their mental health, because they understand the forces that are involved in giving us that experience. And these malachim are so deeply involved in our daily experience that we don't notice them, not because they're far-fetched or they're too difficult to contemplate, but we don't notice them because they're so simple and they're so easy to notice that we take them for granted. We take them like they don't exist. So for example, the malach refoil, we've all seen him in action. Anytime you get a cut, or anytime your body is sick, or anything is not the way that it should be, there is a force, there is a spiritual entity inside of you that is going to try and heal your problems. The cut will come together and it will close up. This happens through the malach refoil. That's what his job is. That's what he does. He tries to make sure you're healthy, physically, spiritually. He's constantly working to repair you. And if the damage stops, a person automatically heals. That's the nature of how it works. So this entity, this malach refoil, he can be developed. Like we see that the tzaddikim said that a doctor has the malach refoil that comes with him, and a bigger doctor has a bigger malach refoil. And the idea is, the more a person spends contemplating health, the more a person spends learning about human health, the more a person spends his time investing in this area, he is creating malachim in this area that altogether are called the malach refoil. This is his chabura to support his malach refoil, and eventually his malach refoil becomes very developed. But the malach refoil can also be developed energetically, like we see with the Baal Shem Tov and other people who had koiches, so they can heal other people through their hands, or even through their mind, or even through their prayer. All these different things are understanding the elemental forces that are causing the experience that we have. So at night, for example, we say, Mimini Michoel, Mismoili Gavriel, Mifone Ariel, Mechore Refol. This is part of the Jewish experience. This is not something that was added later in order to make it sound nice. This was the original Lashon HaKodesh. This is how Avram Avinu saw life. This is how the Avos were able to keep their tradition alive. This is why Klal Yisrael wouldn't leave their language behind, because if you leave the language behind, you lose the control you had, the spiritual control, the spiritual emphasis, and you start going into these different realities that were created by different languages that simply do not correlate with our existence. They do not correlate with how we function and how we operate. And that's why understanding how these malachim work and how we build them and how we deconstruct them and what they do is so important. Another thing we say, we all come home Friday night and we say, Shalom Aleichem, Malachi Shalom. We're speaking to malachim, right? So obviously the intention here is to do some kind of a spiritual work. We're trying to actually manifest something. We're not just doing it because it sounds nice, because there's a good tune to sing it with. So when a person comes home from shul, right, there's two malachim that are melave the person all the way home, and each one wants to manifest. And one of them will manifest and the other one won't. And the one that doesn't will say amen by force, right? We know this. So how does that work? When a person comes home from shul on a Friday night, he's got a family waiting there for him. This family needs his presence. They need his guidance. They need his support. They need the security that he provides. Now on Shabbos, we all gain access to the Neshama Yeseda. The Neshama Yeseda is our ability to dig deeper spiritually, to be more present, to be more conscious, to be more aware. So when we come home on Shabbos, there's two possibilities. We might create a meal, we might create a suda, we might create an experience for these children that is going to be a stabilizing force in their life, that is going to be a malach that gives them happiness, gives them comfort, gives them safety, gives them the feeling that they've arrived at the right planet when they were born, they didn't by mistake end up in the wrong planet. All these things, all these Shabbosim together are going to build those maluchim, those forces, those stabilizing forces within that personality. Now, if that materializes, if the meal is that way, then the Malach Tov was created, he came into manifestation, and the Malach Ra Bal Karchach Yan Omen, there's nothing he can do about that. This angel, this kind angel that was created, this Malach of Shalom, is now going to stand against the Malach Ra for eternity, because that's his job, that's how he works. He's a Malach of peace, he's a Malach of calm, he's a Malach of wonderfulness, and that's how he's going to guide the child for the entire lifetime of the child and afterwards. And the same thing, Chas v'Shalom, the opposite. If it's just an experience that shows conflict, that shows anger, that shows that family life is not the way it should be, that maybe the planet we arrived to is a bit violent and is a bit uncomfortable for us to experience, then the Malach Ra gets his say. Then the Shin Dalet gets created. And that's just the nature of life. This is what we're doing constantly. So we have to remember that. At night, you should go into the bedroom of your child and give him a kiss on their forehead, because that will be a stabilizing force in their life. If you keep doing that every day, you're building within your child special, good forces that are going to help them, they're going to help you, and the child will certainly be grateful. So whenever we come into interaction with other people, you have to be even more conscious. We're always creating, right? We're always thinking, we're always experiencing. So we're creating even when we're not interacting. But when we interact, we're infringing our reality upon somebody else. So we better have something good to offer to them. We better have something nice, something peaceful, something that will help them, something that will give them security, so that this spiritual force can be their guidance as they go through life. So this is the emphasis of Lashon HaKodesh. Lashon HaKodesh turns around our perspective, it turns around our way of seeing life, from being a very physical activity, from being something that's physically understood and spiritually vague, to being spiritually understood and maybe physically vague. The physical aspects are just actions. So the Torah is filled with actions, it's filled with ritual, but the meaning of the ritual, if that's not known, then it could serve any purpose. A person could be doing actions for whatever imagination he has in his mind. So the same action could sometimes serve the good forces, the angelic forces, and the same action can sometimes serve the Sitra Achra if it's not coming from the right place, if it's not Neveah, from a mokem of Chochmah and a mokem of Kedusha. Because if we look deeper in the Torah, we notice that even though on face value the Torah seems to be very strict and the Torah seems to be written in a language where it doesn't have any weakness for man, it doesn't try to please him or comfort him too much. The reality is that the inside of the Torah has nothing more important as its goal than the human spirit. In fact, the Torah itself puts itself aside when the human spirit is in danger. And this is said in the Zohar. The Zohar says that the Torah is a tofel to the neshama. Even though the Torah is a very important tool for the neshama, it's still a tofel to the neshama, and it brings the raya. And the raya is because we see that on Shabbos, if you have a safek pekuach nefesh, even though you're not sure the guy is going to make it if you're mechal Shabbos, and you might be able to save that person by being mechal Shabbos, even there's only a slight chance, you throw away the whole Torah, because Shabbos is shokol against the whole Torah. We don't look at the Torah now. There's a Jewish life in danger. The Torah is meaningless because the Torah came to help life. The Torah didn't come to hurt life. And those of us who are not yet ready to learn Torah properly, those of us who haven't really been koveah in their nefesh, the Jewish qualities of Rachmanim, Baishonim, Imgoim, Lechasodim, when they learn Torah, the Torah thinks they're a goy, so the Torah is going to punish them, because the Torah tests your midas. Like it says, Ein Panim La Torah, it has 70 different faces. Which face is it going to show to you? It's going to show you a face of Midah Keneged Midah. So if a person is not learning as a Rachman, a Baishan, and a Goyim Chesed, he's learning with non-Jewish qualities, he's learning with qualities that he picked up from the Goyim, then guess what? The Torah is going to smack him around. Because that's the protection the Torah has in it. Moshe Rabbeinu can't walk around for 3,000 years protect the Torah. The protection is inside of the Torah. It's the way that it was written. Is your heart sensitive enough? If you had a milas alev, do you understand that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created this world and he wants these people to have peace and to be able to find their way? Or do you think that he just has a fetish to make people do weird stuff and if not, he punishes them? So that's something that's inside your neshama. That's something that's inside of you. If you don't know that naturally, because that's what your heart's telling you, Nobody can convince you of that. And therefore you can see that a Torah can go so many different ways. The same text, the same letters, the same words can cause people to do such a variety of things, some of them the complete opposite of what the intention was. And forget about when it goes out to other texts that were based on our text, and then it just keeps going and flowing until complete madness can take over. Because they don't have the source, they don't have the Aleph, which comes before Bereshis. The realization that Anochi Hashem Elokecha, that this is HaKadosh Baruch Hu's world, it's not your world. HaKadosh Baruch Hu likes his world very much. And he doesn't like the people who destroy his world. He doesn't like the people who make his world a place of pain and suffering for no reason. So, the mitzvahs of the Torah are one aspect of the Torah, but they're not all there is, by any means. In fact, Reb Tzodok says, I think this is at the end of the Sefer HaZechronis, but I might be mistaken, but he says that the Chet Egel was that Klal Yisrael saw the glory of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and they saw all four levels. They saw all four, what they call the Chayas of the Merkava. So Yechezkel, he sees in the Merkava, he sees that there's a Dmus Adam on a kisei, and the kisei is being carried by four animals, right? There's the Aryeh, there's the Nesher, there's the Shoy, and there's the Adam. And these are the four different partsufim. The Zohar compares these partsufim to the human chushim, not the five chushim in the traditional sense, but rather the tools of the moyach. So, for example, the re'iyah, the sight, the vision that a person has, that from there he takes in information to the moyach, is the aryeh. The shmiya is the shoyer. The chishureach and the neshima is the nesher, and the mouth is considered the odom because it's the koyach hadibur. But this is the odom that's in the bottom. The odom that's ala kisei, that's the consciousness. That's the one that's directing all of these four, and it has the ability to maneuver in life through using these four different koyches. So Reb Tzodok says that our connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the reality that they noticed, had four different levels. There was the physical level, the level of action, there was the emotional level, there was the intellectual level, and the level of Ratzon, right, like we spoke about last week. However, when Moshe Rabbeinu left, and Klal Yisrael were not on the Reit Madrege, so they couldn't already connect to the emotional, to the intellectual, to the Ratzon. They couldn't connect anymore to all these. So what did they do? They grabbed the Shoir. What's the Shoir? The Shoir is the Asiyah. They took off from the Kisei of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, just the Shoir, just the level of Asiyah, and they said, El Elecha Yisrael, you do this, you're covered. And that's not Judaism. That's not Judaism. That brings the bottom up to the top. The most important part is the Ratzon, the Re'usa de Liba. After that comes your thought and your intellect and your beliefs. After that comes your emotions. The actions are tools, they're kelim. They're kelim that if you know what you're building, this kelim will help you build. Like the Zohar says, these are 613 eitzes. Eitzes to realize and recognize Anochi Hashem Elokecha. Out of these eitzes, there are 248 eitzes that are active eitzes, that through them you can recognize Anochi Hashem Elokecha. And out of the 613 eitzes, there are 365 negative commandments, which are there to support La'yir L'cholim Acherim. And if we could try to understand how people thought at that time, based on Lashon HaKodesh, based on what we've learned, and try to realize that these people were steeped in knowledge of how the body works. And some of the places we can see this is a lot of the mythology that even the Goyim have about vampires and about demons. A lot of it is based on the previous Chochmah. But when the Goyim became very philosophical and they kicked the whole spiritual realm into non-existence by thinking that it exists somewhere that we have no connection to, at that point, even they stopped understanding their own myths and their own previous wisdom. So, for example, like we spoke last week, when a person thinks, he creates a malach, or he creates a shin daled, right? Now, where does this get written into? It gets written into the blood. Everything we think gets written into our blood, and eventually it ends up being our entire body parts. Our entire body is created of tissue that has our nature to it, has our DNA, and it also has the nature of what it is you were thinking at the time you created it, frozen into it. And that's what keeps your character the way that it is. That's what gives you stability. So you have your entire, you know who you are, because it's all written down. It's all kept somewhere. Now, when a person has in his blood negative energies, so the Goyim would say that the vampires, they drink blood. Right? They drink blood, meaning that they are in your blood and they're taking away your ability to use your blood in your own interest, because they are causing you to use your energy in the wrong directions. And the same thing would be, they would say that if it's exposed to the light, it disappears. And that's something that's very obvious. As soon as you notice how it works and you notice what it's doing to you, you have the power, you have the ability through the light of your consciousness and awareness to make them disappear. So all these things are talking about the real spiritual reality. They're talking about what used to happen. At that time in Mitzrayim, you had people who would drink blood for this purpose, to gain the spiritual strength of somebody else. And that's why there's a big Easter in the Torah. It says, Rak chazak ve'amotz lebilti achol adam. Be courageous, don't drink it, don't do it. Even though the other guy might have an advantage over you in battle or whatever because of what he's doing, don't do it, because you're actually serving the negative forces. You're bringing in negative forces to your body because of how the system works, and you don't want to have any part in that. So many things in our Torah relate to this, and something very, very close to us, something we do almost every day, is putting on tefillin. So when you put on tefillin, the shein that's on the tefillin, right, the shein always represents seichel. And the reason the seichel is represented by a shein is because it has a left, a right, and a machriya. It has two sides and a decision in the middle, and that's the nature of the mind and how it works. Always when there's a thought, every thought comes in with a possible negative. When you think it's day now or it's night now, the other option comes into your mind automatically to be evaluated, and then you choose, and then you're machriya. So shein always represents seichel, and the daled represents dam. So when a seichel is in the dam, it's a shein daled. But what do? We put in a yud. The yud is the parshios, and there's also the kesher of the tefillin. Through the parshios, through the kesher of the tefillin, we make from a shein daled shakai. We make a HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name. We make a holy name out of it. So in order to resemble that, we put on the moyach, right, the mukam of the tinik is, which is the area where the mind is doing its thinking, and we tie it down as if we were tying down a shein daled. And the same thing, our left hand, because that's the shoresh of gvuris, and from there comes all the negative actions, all the dinim, and all the possible kas and harming other people that comes. So we tie down our left arm, and kedei l'shabed b'zeh tavas imachshavas libeinu lavedoses. So who are being mishabed? We're being mishabed these koiches that are within our blood, that we're trying to put the parshias in them, that they should know. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, V'ahavta Eis, and all the four parshias, which of course have tremendous depth, how they work and why they work and what the goal is that we're trying to accomplish. But the idea is that once a person understands Lashon HaKodesh, once a person understands the culture that these people lived in, the things that we do start making so much more sense. Because it wasn't created to be tricky, it wasn't created to fool anybody, it wasn't created to be difficult. It was created to help us, it was created to teach us wisdom, and the Torah expects of us a lot more than we could possibly imagine. And I'll give you an example. Moshe Rabbeinu is talking about Klal Yisrael's Chochmah, right? And he speaks about the planets and the signs, the signs of the zodiac, the astrological signs that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created, the mazalos, in order to make life happen on this earth. So Moshe Rabbeinu says, Kihi chochmaschem ivinaschem le'inei yoamim, right? This is your wisdom and understanding in the eyes of the nations, meaning if you want to show them how smart you are, this is your area to shine. So Chazal tell us, somebody who knows how to calculate the tkufos and the mazolos, and he doesn't do it, Aleim HaKosev Oimer, Kidvar Hashem Bozo. right? He embarrasses the word of Hashem. Now, this Chachma is a Chachma that if somebody knows it, he knows every moment which midah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is shoylet on that moment. Right? Because the mazolos and the kechovim are basically like a big clock. So you got the sun in the middle, and you got all of these kechovim running around. And you got the 12 different hours, which is the 12 mazolos that are around and around, that are surrounding the entire, the cosmos, right, that we're talking about now. Now, from these stars, there's energy coming to us constantly. There's vibrations, there's frequencies, there's rays. Like the Pasuk says, right? The rays of these stars, the rays of every physical entity, it spreads through the entire universe. Now, these planets, as they're turning around the clock, they're going from mazel to mazel, each planet at a different speed. Some of them stay there very short, and some of them stay at each mazel very long. But be that as it may, as the energy and the frequency and the vibration travels from the stars to Earth, the vibration coming from the planet gets colored with the specific energy of the stars, of the mazel of that planet that's now in charge of that planet, and that affects us. That affects our oxygen that we're breathing in every moment. That it should be different. So that every moment we get a different experience from the universe. And that clock keeps on turning constantly. This is what creates time. So within time, every moment is a different moment, is a new moment, a moment that's never seen life before, and a moment that has the ability to manifest, and then it creates its malochim through olam shona nefesh, right? There's a zivig of olam shona nefesh, which works by having the olam, which is the space, all the stars, all the planets, the nefesh, which is the human being, the perception of man that's trying to perceive itself, and the shana is like a shatchin that's creating the shidduch between these two, the olam and the nefesh. So the nefesh receives its ashpah from the olam through shana, through time. So every time, every moment is a different ashpah. Now, in order for somebody to understand properly this chachma, he needs to know every sign, every astrological sign, how it affects the nefesh. And every planet, how it affects the nefesh, and all these combinations, how they affect the nefesh. So if the moon is in one, if it's in Pisces, how is that different than the moon in Aries?
Does it repeat itself?
It's repeating itself, each one it's repeating the 12, but because there are so many different ones, so it takes thousands of years to go through a full cycle. And still, our entire galaxy is traveling, everything is traveling. So even if you ever got to the same orientation, it still wouldn't be the same experience. And we speak about this every night when we say in the Bracha of Ma'arev Arovim, right? It says, so all this is part of our religion. All this is part of understanding. So the point I'm trying to make is that Moshe Rabbeinu expects you to know this information as a base language. Before we can even start talking about the Torah, you want to know what Pesach is? You want to know what Sukkot is? You want to know what it means to take a lulav and an esrog? You want to know what it means to put on tefillin? Do you know already the basic stuff? Have you done your homework? That's not your chokhmah for yourself. No, we didn't even start that yet. But if you want to show off to other people, that's a good start. Just use the easy stuff. Just show them a little bit, because I don't know how far they'll go. So this is the level of Moshe Rabbeinu. Just to appreciate who we're talking about. This man grew up in the house of the most powerful person in the world at the time, in an empire, in a kingdom that was the smartest, according to the Torah, that ever existed, and lasted maybe the longest in human history. I don't know if there's an empire that lasted longer than the Egyptian king. They had multiple dynasties. Maybe the Chinese can compete, I'm not sure. But the point is, Moshe Rabbeinu grew up in that man's palace. And wisdom was something they all knew. Ad kedei kach that even Chazal tell us that there wasn't a God, which means there isn't a force in nature that Paro didn't know. He had a book, And he had everything, every force, every power in the world that exists, he knew what it was and how it works. But there was one thing he didn't know, that Moshe Rabbeinu taught him, which is that all that exists for man. Not man is serving them, they're serving man. That's the difference. That's the philosophical machlokes between Paroi and Moshe Rabbeinu. And that's our Torah. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu is trying to teach us. And that's how Moshe Rabbeinu is coming to us with an offer from the creator of the universe himself, who says, "Va'atem tiyu li mamleches kahanim v'goy kodesh." You will be my people. Why? Because you will understand my wisdom. You will know how I act. Why will you know? Because I gave you 613 eitzes. I gave you 613 pieces of advice that each one of them, if you delve into it and you understand how it works, you will understand the whole Torah. Like the Zohar says many, many times, that every mitzvah includes in it all the Taryag mitzvahs. So that's ultimately our goal. That's how HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mashpia to the Shechina. That's how HaKadosh Baruch Hu can give and make the consciousness within us grow, is through wisdom, through understanding, through knowledge, so that we can realize what he really created for us, and how much he appreciates us, and how much he wants us to succeed. Because there's nothing else, there's no other goal. This is it. This world is the goal. This life is the goal. Not in the way we're living it necessarily, but when we will realize how it works, we will know what we're doing. We will understand the wisdom of how we work and how we function. We will leave our imagined reality and start living in the real reality. Then everything was created for this specific purpose. So that people who know how to coexist, who understand the wisdom of Hashem, who understand the wisdom within nature and within reality, and know how to coexist as one, know how to help each other out as one, that they can have this world. L'olam yirshu oretz. That Klal Yisrael is here to be yorish the oretz. The oretz doesn't just mean the physical, it means everything there is involved with this oretz. That's why it was created. So obviously when we're dealing with the creator of all things, the one who created our minds and taught it how to think, and he created our hearts and taught it how to feel, and created our liver and allowed it to act, obviously he's not going to be fooled by our costume. We belong here, we belong there, we do this, we daven this, we make this. If a person hasn't learned how to be a basic human being, how to have basic derech eretz, how to have basic coexistence, how not to create negative forces, negative energies within other people, he does not coexist with other people, he's still before the Torah. His time is not yet to learn Torah. He first has to learn how to be a human being. And where do we see this? Hillel HaZoken. Hillel HaZoken was a Nossi. He's not a man to just speak freely and not worry about the consequences of his words. Hillel HaZoken was an extremely respected person that was a leader of Klal Yisrael. And he says to the Ger, says, something that's not good for you, don't do it upon somebody else. The rest of the Torah is just a parish. What does that mean? What does that mean? And what it means is first, you have to be a human being. First, your only goal in life should be to realize all these poor neshamas who are living in this world and are going through indescribable suffering. How can I make their life better? That should be your first goal. And you start with yourself and your children and the people around you and your friends. How can I make their life better? What can I say or do to make people's lives better? And when you've already done all that, and you still feel a yearning, you still feel an emptiness, and you say, no, I want to make their life even better. It's not good enough yet. Everything I've done is nothing. I want to do more for them because this world, I can manifest, I can do. How can I help? How can I serve? If you've already tried everything and you don't know how to go further, then you learn Torah. You know why? Because then you're thinking like Moshe Rabbeinu. Then he has what to tell you. As long as that's not your problem, he's got nothing to say to you. He does not solve your other problems. He never really thought about them. His only concern was, how do I help these poor people? Ad kedei kach, then if it was him or the people, he gladly chose the people. He says, I got no use over here. I got nothing to do. What do I need to be here for if I can't help the people? That was Moshe Rabbeinu. So if you want to understand his wisdom, you want to understand what he's talking about, you want to understand his solutions to life, you need to have a similar problem to him. You need to have exhausted every ability you have to help humanity. And once you've done that, you come to the Torah and ask him, Moshe Rabbeinu, I've done everything I can. Why don't you teach me how to help them even more? How can I help more deeply? How can I do something that's be'emes good for them? Not just temporary good. Something that's really good. Something that will help them shift into a better place, into a better reality, into a better consciousness. And then you're looking for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Who's HaKadosh Baruch Hu? We don't know him, right? We don't know what the potential is. We don't know, but we do know one thing. We know his midos. He's a Rachum, he's a Chanun, he's a Erech HaPayim, he's a Rav Chesed. That's who he is. You want him? Chazal tell us a simple answer. Hadbek b'midosav. You want to be close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Be dovek in his midos. We cannot fool him. It doesn't matter what we say and how we act, and if people think we're very, very good and we look like we're really religious and we really mean it and all that, it's useless. You're dealing with the creator of the universe. He created you. He knows everything that's going on inside of you and outside of you. And everything that ever happened to you is written into you. It's part of your character. It's part of your being. It's part of your spirit. And that is going to be your life. That's going to be the reality you're going to have to put up with. Not God, but yourself, the spiritual self that you created. And if in there's negative, then you're going to have to deal with that negative. Like the pasuk says, the evil punishes. Nobody else. Because Baruch Hu is not standing there with a stick trying to punish anybody. He has no interest in punishing anybody. But if we create evil, then the evil is in us. And until we get rid of it, there will be evil in us. And that's the whole punishment. Because you're not manifesting your potential. You're not being who you might be. Many people look at like Gehenna that comes after death as if HaKadosh Baruch Hu is like, all right, you did your share, now we're going to evaluate you, and now we're going to see where you deserve to go. But that's how it's told to children. That's obviously not really how it takes place. The reality is HaKadosh Baruch Hu is one shtick good, one shtick chesed. And because he is one shtick chesed, because he is so good, when you leave the world and you were not chesed, and you realize the potential that you had, you realized how much you could have helped, what a difference you could have made, and instead you were busy with your pettiness, that alone is the Gehenna. HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't need to punish you. The reality that you went through this entire life, and you had so much opportunity, and you had all these people around you that needed your support, needed your nice words, needed you to be there for them, needed your help, and you were just distracted and busy with nonsense, and therefore you're upset and aggravated and frustrated, and that's all they got from you. That's hell. You don't need anything else. And we're not even talking about recognizing the Chochmah in the Torah and how much good that could have done for you. If you would have learned, if you would have understood how a human being really works, if you would have understood the levels of Gan Eden that a person could realize in this world. Like Tzaddikim said, if the Rishonim knew how much time we have from our mitzvahs, from our avodah, they'd be running after us. And like the Saam HaChaim writes, that if people knew the Mesikas HaTorah, hayu mishtagim, they would go crazy. And the Saam HaChaim was not known to exaggerate. So these things are realities that people are screaming and yelling to us that we should recognize and realize. This is true. This is Hashem. This is your life. This is what He wants. He wants you to be good. He wants you to be kind. He wants you to be a member of society. It's not some external God that's looking out from some strange place and trying to see if you're going to follow His laws. It's somebody that created the world, and He cares about it very, very, very deeply. He cares about every single person. He cares about every single one of us. He cares about how we speak to each other. When you speak to another Jew, you can imagine that you're speaking to HaKadosh Baruch Hu Himself, and guess what? He takes what you say very seriously and very personally. You're speaking to His Son. You're speaking to the person that He created. He has a tremendous interest in this person's success. And if you're not helping that person's success, if you're chas v'sholem, a detriment to a person's success, then you're aggravating the very purpose of life. You're withholding HaKadosh Baruch Hu from showing up into the Shekhinah, from giving love to the Shekhinah, which He so desperately needs and so desperately deserves. So that's why we need to be extremely careful with these things. Because this is at the side of what we believe. You're not going to get away with it saying, well, I went davening, and I did this, and I did that, and I had the nicest esrog in the whole shul. all that is not before Ben Adam Lachaveiroi. It's not before Ben Adam Lachaveiroi. When Rebbe Akiva said, "V'hafta l'recha kamocha ze klal gadol b'Torah," and Ben Azai argues and he says, "No, not that. I'll give you an even better one. Zeh Sefer told us Adam, b'tzelem elikim asas Adam. B'tzelem elikim. V'hafta l'recha kamocha ze katan. It's not even enough. Who says you love yourself enough? B'tzelem elikim. How does it say in the Torah when a person gets hung, right? Chas v'sholem, for whatever reason, it says L'solin ivlase alaed kikillas elikim toli. And the Chazal tell us, because the mashal of two twins, right? The one was a melech, and one unfortunately went in ways that are not so good. So eventually, when they had to punish the twin, so the melech said, "We got to keep it quiet. We can't really make a fuss over here because I don't want people to see my dioikim, my lookalike getting punished like that. It's a bizoin for the melech." So a person is a tzelem elikim. A person represents HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this world. A person is the ultimate goal of why there even is a Torah. So if somebody doesn't know that a person is Kodesh HaKadoshim, how's he ever going to understand any of the wisdom of the Torah? The Torah will only punish him and patch him around. The Torah has nothing else for him. So therefore, we need to take this extremely seriously. We need to realize this in a very, very deep place so that we recognize that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is real. He created what is. He didn't create some other world that you're imagining, and therefore when you get there, you'll find a way to deal with him. This is it. This is your relationship with him every day. This is it.
Our core is so steered away from
Because
Hashem. We created such a. How come we were steered so?
Because we've been around people. We've been in Golis for so long that we don't even remember who we are anymore. We don't remember who we are. So we can't blame the victim. You know, look at our history. Look what happened to us. We've been beaten up in a way that nobody else can claim. And that's not necessarily a fun thing to say, but it justifies not knowing what you stand for. You understand? But we have to learn from these mistakes. We have to learn. Look, just 70, 80 years ago, came across a guy who realized how human nature works. He realized how propaganda works. He realized how you can influence people with words. You can create a virtual reality with words. And look at the damage he did. He killed 6 million of us with the power of words, with the power of speech. We need to learn from that. Midatoy v'meruba. So we need to understand how we function. If you want to talk more in the 21st century language, we'll walk away a little bit from the Malachim and the Shadim, make it a little easier on people's nerves. So now we're going to talk about chemicals, right? So your brain releases chemicals based on the words that I tell you. And that's a reality. Why? Because there's a little malach called Shamuel in your ears. And what Shamuel does, he makes a transfer between the physical sounds that I'm making and the spiritual meaning that the words are going to have to you. And we tickled this malach a little bit in the first shir, for those who remember. So that malach, his job is, there's sound, there's stuff going on, he's going to try to make words out of that and he's going to convert it to meaning. Now, as soon as that happens, there's a response in your brain, a chemical response. Your brain is releasing chemicals based on the reality that I've put you in. That's my words. You understand? So the problem in our society essentially is that we're releasing the wrong chemicals in each other's brains. You understand? HaKadosh Baruch Hu has rachmim. He says, you're a human being, you're going to come into this world, poor guy, huge negative forces. There's been a war between good and evil going on for thousands of years. I'm sending you in there. The least I can do for you is give you a fully stocked pharmacy. So in case something goes wrong, you go to your pharmacy and you get the right chemicals to balance yourself out, right? And that pharmacy is the Koach HaDibur. The Koach HaDibur is a pharmacy that can give you any combination of chemicals out of your brain. If you figure out the right words to say to trigger those areas in the person's brain and you make the right combination of words, a certain release will happen. But people have become so arrogant, they've become so busy accumulating nonsense that they haven't even noticed what type of species we are. They haven't even noticed how we function. And while they're running after all the nonsense, they're stabbing each other and releasing harmful chemicals in each other's brains. They're activating the Saam HaChaim. Saam HaChaim's job is to release chemicals of anger into our system. That's what he does. He, the Saam HaChaim, is responsible on mashchis, af, and chema, right? The different types of anger. Evro, v'zam, v'tzora, mishlachas, malachirom, all these are different spiritual forces that if you want to speak 21st century language, we can call them chemicals or hormones or whatever else. And on the other hand, you have his zigosoi, Lilis, and her job is to make us sad, atzvis. And that's why after the first chait, we have both the man and the woman were cursed with atzvis. Be'etzev teil dibonim, in bitzovin techlen, right? Bezeh sapecho toichalechem. So there's itzovin, there's sadness. Why is there sadness? Because the balance in the brain has been thrown off. And because this balance in the brain is thrown off, he's going to die. Not only will he die at the end, he's constantly dying because he's got a leak in his bad chemicals. It's always taking away his life. He's always a little bit afraid. He's always a little bit not sure. He's always a little bit angry. He's always a little bit frustrated. That means he's not alive. Why is he not alive? Because his tzenoides are clogged. What are they clogged with? What is his tzenoides? Tzenoides are the emotional, the intellectual, the rotzon, the desire. All these are the tzenoides that give a person life. But once they get clogged with negative energy, they get clogged with negative forces, now I try to release good chemicals from your brain. I got a whole avoid to do. First I got to be able to shut off the negative, and then I got to, it's a whole zach. Why? Because some people, they haven't used their positive valves in months and years. The tzenoides are completely clogged. It's just a bundle of anger rolling around. So all this is a tremendous spiritual avodah. How did we get to all this? How did we get to such a low place? Because we've forgotten Lashon HaKodesh. We don't speak Lashon HaKodesh. We don't emphasize the spiritual. We don't even know how it works. So I said something. Who cares? Logically, I'm perfectly fine. I'm the nicest guy. I had every right to be angry. I have every right. Who cares what right you have? You're damaging me. You're causing damage to HaKadosh Baruch Hu's world. Your rights, reconfigure. What does it mean a person has a logic right? It means that in our society, I'm going to explain to you the different buttons that were pushed in my brain in order to cause this chemical release of anger. Beautiful. Why don't you next time push different buttons and release different chemicals? You said to yourself, so don't say that to yourself. Say something else to yourself. It's just that we're ignorant. We don't realize that the damage is so real. Why? Because it comes slowly, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is marich af, right? He put it into our nature that we're marich af, meaning the child's not going to go crazy that minute, but eventually, if we keep terrorizing him, if we keep talking to him the wrong way, if we keep enforcing things with the wrong chemicals, then eventually he might go crazy. Eventually something really negative might come out of it. So because of this, because there's a delayed response, because it takes time, because the spiritual works on a different time clock than the physical, so people just disregard it as if it's not real. But boy, is it real. Just go ask any psychologist or psychiatrist. Their offices are extremely busy nowadays. And the reason for that is because we don't respect human beings the way that they deserve to be respected. A human being is kodesh HaKadoshim. You can see this in Nefesh HaChaim. This is not even Chasidic. This is simple Torah. And Nefesh HaChaim says that when a person thinks a thought that's not proper, it is worse than when Titus went into the Kodesh HaKadoshim with a Zoina. Because the Kodesh HaKadoshim is just a physical representation of the collective consciousness of the collective lave of Klal Yisrael. So Titus is doing it in the physical representation. Mela, okay, but the person that's doing it is doing it in the actual thing. He's bringing it into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. His thoughts are in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. So if you're thinking bad about another person in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, who do you think you're talking to? The HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. This is reality. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Shem Havaya is Chasomoy Emes, meaning if something happened, then it has the Chosam of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He is the one that keeps track of what's real, not our imagination. So therefore, Lashon HaKodesh, the way that Klal Yisrael spoke it in Mitzrayim, Lashon HaKodesh, the way that the Torah was written, Lashon HaKodesh that teaches us really how to focus on the spiritual and how to be able to really create coexistence between people, create love between people, create happiness between people. That's the ultimate goal. That's the ultimate goal of the language. Without Lashon HaKodesh, we will never understand the Chochmas HaTorah. It's not possible. The Chochmas HaTorah is infinitely deeper, right, than the depth of simple Lashon HaKodesh. But we're so far away. We're so far away, we don't even understand the basic principles of the Torah. The Torah, I'll give you another example of how far we are from understanding how the Torah works. So for us, we assume that the text is trying to tell us a story. The text is trying to tell us what's going on. The text is trying to tell us what's happening. We neglect to notice how the text is actually giving us feelings, emotions. It's changing our ruach as we read. So for example, you read in Yeshaya, you read a very upbeat, loving nevuah, and suddenly you feel, wow, HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves us. You read in Yirmiyahu, you read a difficult one, and you feel, hey, what's going on? This guy's really angry. So then, you didn't do anything different between reading those two passages, right? You're still the same guy. Whatever it is you did, whether he's angry or not, that hasn't changed by you going through those passages. But in your heart, it feels very different. Your relationship with him feels very different. And that's because the Torah has a way of how it's supposed to be learned. It has a system to it. It has an understanding. It has different midas. It has different shivim ponim, and it also has, you can read it mitzad chesed, you can read it mitzad gvura, you can read it mitzad rachamim. Everything in the Torah is wisdom. It's knowledge. If you understand the wisdom that's within the nevuah of Yirmiyahu, even though it sounds bitter, when you understand the wisdom, it's just as sweet as the other one. It's just our understanding that's lacking. And that's something we really have to work on. So essentially, the Torah gives us the entire Shtalshelus from Adam Rishon, so that we know all the negative entities that were created, so that we can deal with them appropriately. And what do I mean by that? According to the Torah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world without any ruchos rois. Pure good, pure kindness. What happened? The Chet of the Nochosh, the story with Cain and Hevel, and it went from there. So Chazal tell us that the mazikim in the world are the neshamas of the Rishonim. So this Rasha, he goes through life, he's creating more and more and more and more Shein Dalet, he's creating more and more negative forces, and eventually this is who he is. This is all that he is. And now his job is to run around the world and do damage. He doesn't know how to do anything else. This is where he got stuck. Until comes the tzaddik, and as the Rosh is trying to do damage to the tzaddik actually releases him of his problem and makes him recognize that Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. And that's a tikkun of the neshamas. The Baal Shem Tov was very into that type of work, and a lot of big people worked with neshamas to be mesak in the neshamas. So the Torah is giving you the entire blueprint of how life actually came into a manifestation from Adam Rishon. Adam Rishon is the first medaber that speaks the divine language, that understands the alabes and understands the oasis, and he's living in Gan Eden. Why? Because he's the king of the world. Who's going to tell him what to do? But then comes Chava, and suddenly there's two, and before you know it, things are not as pretty as they were, and they're out of there. So now, the Torah tells you every single name that is of importance, that created these spirits within us, so that we know how to go about them. So that's why Chazal tell us that V'achois loitan timno is just as important a pasuk as Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Because it's a pasuk in the Torah. Meaning, if you ever want to get the Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, you're going to need to know that Achois loitan is timno. Because Timna happens to be the mother of Amalek. How are you going to annihilate Amalek if you don't know who he is and how he works? If you don't know how to find him, how are you going to kill him? So all this information, who is Esav, who is Yishmael, who is Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, lahavdil, who is everything that is happening, the Shvatim, everything is giving you knowledge so that you know who you are and you understand how to come back to yourself, to become who HaKadosh Baruch Hu intended, to become the natural human being that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created without any of the damage and any of the confusion and any of the arrogance that we've absorbed over so many years in Galus. So I think I'm going to stop here now. You want to do questions?
What the goyim, in terms of nefesh, so are they also creating?
Everybody's creating, but they're not creating for us because they don't have our language. So they're creating for us if we buy into their language, but they're not creating for us if we stick to our language. And that's what Klal Yisrael.
So they're not affecting us.
They are affecting us. Of course they're affecting us. If it's going to be like it was in the time of Shlomo HaMelech, where wisdom is in charge of the universe, and whoever is the wisest is on top, so then Klal Yisrael will rise to the top because we have the deepest wisdom. We have a tradition that nobody else has. But if we are in Galus, so it says that the Shefa goes through them and it comes to us, meaning they're the ones dictating reality. We live in their world, so to speak. So therefore, obviously what they think and what they believe and how they act is going to affect our minds. It's going to affect how we think and how we believe. So it's not intrinsic necessarily, because the Zohar says we're the heart, right? The Klal Yisrael is the lave. Everybody has their parts, because even in the koima of the whole globe, it's also like a human body, and different nations have different body parts. So the lave is the most influential body part, and how the lave feels is extremely important. And therefore, we have a certain sensitivity that we can work with words in a deeper way. But if we're not using that wisdom, then we become very influenced by them. And one place you can see it very strongly is in the Megillah, where Chazal tell us that every Amelech in the Megillah is a Malka Shel Olam. Well, we know we're talking about Achashverosh. So what happened? Because Achashverosh was the biggest force in nature at that time, he was the king over all the other kings. So therefore, when the Shefa came from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it came through Achashverosh, and therefore his decisions were considered to be decisions of the Melech Malchei Hamlochim. And through that, we saw, as Esther, the Sof Kol HaNisim, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is taking care of us even while he is in Achashverosh's brain. That's ultimately the message of the Megillah.
It's not really a specific question, but just like historically, it seems like what you're talking about is there's the Ikka and the Tofel, and once upon a time we knew what the Ikka was, and now we focus on the Tofel. But a few things. First of all, it seems like this is not a new problem, but it's been going on for thousands of years. And also the Torah itself seems to set itself up for being misunderstood, because I don't know percentage-wise, but I mean a large percentage of it seems to be focusing just on the details. For example, like you've got two whole parashas just speaking about the begodim of the Kohen Gadol. Kohen Gadol's got to be a tzaddik and Yerushalayim. It doesn't speak about that. When there's in the Baal Shem, every Yom Kippur the Kohen Gadol dies because the Ikka was missing. So it seems almost like they're unfair that the Torah itself is trying to set us up for failure in a way.
Okay. So let's talk about both of them.
And when you look at the Hakdama, the Chayvus Harabavos, it's like new Chiddush, like he's finding a psukim here and there to prove what the Ikka really is. But it seems like for most people then and today, like you look at what's being taught in the schools, the Hayders, doesn't matter if it's Chasidic, it's not talking about the Ikka, it's all brought in.
So let's separate that into 2 points. First of all, you define it as Ikka and Tofel, and I don't see it that way. I'm not saying that this is the Ikka or that's the Ikka. What I'm saying is that their basic perception of life was extremely different than ours. And therefore, things that today you might have to scream and yell and emphasize, and then maybe people will understand, at that time people understood it as basic reality. You didn't have to explain it. You didn't even have to mention it. Nobody...
Which time? The time of the others?
The time of, as long as there were Nevi'im around. Because a Navi was an authentic Jewish Gadol, right? A Navi had confirmation from an extremely good source. He had a hechsher from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So as long as you have Nevi'im, there's many things you don't need to explain. It's enough that you give the spitz chachmas. It's like Moshe Rabbeinu, it says in the Sefer HaTmuna, he couldn't express the things that he was trying to say. because they're way beyond the usual comprehension and they cannot be dressed in words. And therefore, he gave over his chachma like this, and things that might seem inconsequential to you are extremely consequential. And one of the simple ways to see that is that we know that a Sefer Torah that's missing a single letter is possible. If the actions are all that's important, so it took out a letter. You can even take it out from somewhere in the stories. V'achois lo yitantimno. They won't say v'achois, we'll say achois. Not enough? Because that's not our Torah. So you're asking how a few thousand years later do we misunderstand what happened a few thousand years ago? I mean, look at history. This is how life works. This is how it evolves. Now, regarding the Kahanim, you see that the clothing is not the Iker. Because if the clothing was the Iker, he wouldn't die. I'm sure that he took the right, he dressed perfectly for the position. There was no lack of money. That wasn't the issue. In fact, I think it was too much money that caused him to be able to buy the Kehina. So it wasn't that they didn't do it properly. It was that their very quality, their spiritual reality, was not up to par. And therefore, as soon as they met reality it couldn't handle them. Like it says, meaning the reality, the real realization of what life is, and what they thought it was, just clashed in there until they couldn't take it. So
they were making that mistake even when they were Nevi'im.
Nevi'im ended at the Anshiknes Agdol by the first, after the Chorah, and Ezra, and the Chagis Chaim Malachi. Those were the last, maybe Mordechai Tzaddik, but that was it. So when Kodesh built the second Beis Hamikdash, there were no Nevi'im. And that's where...
Either way, we see that, well, what chance do we have? The Kohanim, just after the Nevuah finished, we're falling into that trap. So,
you're making a good argument. We don't really stand a very good chance, except if we're serious about it and Hashem loves us, because those people obviously were not serious about it. So if we're going to be more serious than them and we're going to mean it more than they did, then we're going to get it more than they did. Otherwise, you're right. It's not going to come to us just by, just easily. You just read it, oh, it's perfect, makes sense. That's not how it's going to work.
What did it mean that Moshe Rabbeinu, by Rabbi Akiva, he didn't understand Rabbi Akiva's Torah until they said to him, no.
Of course, because Moshe Rabbeinu's Torah, if you read the Torah, there's no logic involved in it. Sometimes you see a little Kal V'chomer, like last week it says, Hen Yisrael Shama Elai, right? Ech Yishmeinu Paroi. But that's as far as the logic of the Torah goes. Other than that, he's just telling you stuff. And the reason for that is because this is not Torah Shebaal Peh, the way the Torah Shebaal Peh was written. This is not that type of language at all. There's no proof that God exists, for example, in the Torah. He never gets into that discussion. It's not even a conversation that he has with you. Prove to me that he is, that he isn't, how do I know? All that doesn't exist, even in the Navi. The only thing that people asked for proof of is, how do I know that you're a real prophet? And that you'll find many places, that they ask for a ois, or they ask for a moifis. How do I know that you're real? But HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we all know who HaKadosh Baruch Hu is. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the one who made this be. If you get access to reality, if you can tell me things about reality that I can't know, then you're good, then you're golden. But if not, how do I know to believe you? How do I know your message is right? But there was never a question of, how do I know there's a God? They weren't up to there. It never got to that. That wasn't their type of speak. So when Moshe Rabbeinu sees Rabbi Akiva, so he now sees that he has all kinds of arguments and questions and answers and dialogue, and his mind was not built like that at all. This is not how he thought, this is not how he perceived, and this is not how he got to his level. So it's a very different way of interpreting the Torah. But the concept of the Torah Shebaal Peh, it's interesting that when we say Torah Shebichsav, there's no Baal in there, right? There's Torah Shebichsav, and we don't say Torah Shebaal Peh. We don't say Torah Shebaal Peh. Because the Torah Shebaal Peh is not about the mouth, it's about the one who owns it. It's the owner of the mouth. He's the one, who's the Baal HaTorah, he's talking. And the Torah Shebaal Peh dresses up according to each generation in order to guide the generation. But it depends on the leaders how they're going to interpret that, how they're going to manifest that reality within a specific space. A lot of the Lashon HaKodesh, it seems to me, was forgotten in the transition from Europe to America. because the European, maybe the Hamon Am was similar, but still they were more connected to the concept of Malochim, and they were more connected to the concept of the spiritual and how it works. They're more connected with supporting each other, especially because the people outside were violent. They were not nice to them per se. So automatically that causes people to stick together and be nice to each other and have a certain family life, a certain value of life that maybe is not so evident today. So a lot of those things didn't translate well into the society that we've created in America, and that's why even more of what was maybe known in Europe is not known today. The Gedol Yisrael for sure, like Klonis Kalman and Piasetzne, and people who wrote Svarim at that time, they were a lot more into the spiritual, a lot more into thinking, a lot more into understanding, a lot more into wisdom. They saw that life is a wisdom. Whether they understood the wisdom or not is already the next step. But the original step is realizing that life is a manifestation of wisdom. Somebody's talking. Life is talking. Everything that happens is talking because it's saying, I happened because of what happened before me. That's what life is always saying. If you don't want me to happen, see what happened before me and don't end up here. If you do want me to happen, see what happened before me and do it again. And that's how we have to learn from life and learn from our experience in order to make it better.
Didn't directly answer what, but the pursuit, like we asked the Pashas do.
So we did speak about the fact that every letter is important, which makes you realize that it's not what you think. But why did it take this phase? So according to Chazal, the reason was so that the Goyim don't steal our wisdom. So that the Goyim who inherit our Torah by copying it, which eventually was going to happen, they get beaten up by it. That was the trick. That's how people thought at the time, and that's how it works. So there's kotzim, there's difficult areas in every holy sefer, in every sefer Kabbalah, even in the Zohar, even the Ari. There are areas that are extremely difficult to digest for a human being, and the reason for that is because that's how you weed out people who don't belong there. So the Torah, who all the nations knew that Klal Yisrael is going through some tremendous upheaval, and they have spiritual insight, and they know what's going on. They even got out of Egypt, the most powerful nation in the world, that knows every different type of kishuv and every different type of mind control, and yet these people are out. So the last thing we need is for everybody to go learn our wisdom and dominate us with it. So therefore, it says in Chazal that when the Torah was translated into Yevoni, the whole world shook. Right? The whole world shook out of place. So what that means, obviously, is that the whole reality, the whole meaning of the Torah was stripped away. It doesn't mean that. That's not what it was trying to say. It wasn't trying to say whatever it is you can say in a different language. If you can say it in a different language, it doesn't mean that. If it makes sense to you today, but in the time of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, it wouldn't make sense what you're saying, then it doesn't mean that. This is talking about then. This happened then. This made sense then. You want to understand what it means? Go back there. And then you can extrapolate it to what it would mean now. Good?